This week on Inside Olympia,
2541 21st Street, Apartment 2R.
the summer months are traditionally the deadliest on the roads. How is Washington State working to reduce crashes and deaths? And what new tools are available? On the program, Shelly Baldwin, Acting Director of the state's Traffic Safety Commission.
From the TVW studio, it's Inside Olympia with host Austin Jenkins.
And welcome to Inside Olympia. The 100 days of summer are supposed to be fun, but the summer months are also some of the most dangerous on the roads. What is the state doing to try to keep people alive? What new tools are available? And more broadly, what are the current trends after a COVID-era spike in speeding and roadway fatalities? On the program for the full hour this week is Shelly Baldwin, the Acting Director of the Washington State Traffic Safety Commission. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
We should note you are acting director, but you've actually been in this role for some time. It's just when a new governor comes in, you sort of revert to the acting until they have time to make it official again. But you've been the director for some time, and we've spoken before.
Yes.
And we've spoken in the context of this very alarming COVID era and post-COVID era spike in traffic fatalities that undid a lot of the progress made over the past several decades. Bring us up to speed. It seems as if nationally and hopefully in this state we've started to turn a corner now that we're a few years out. But what is the state of play when it comes to highway safety?
So exactly what you said. In 2023, we had the highest number of traffic deaths that we've seen in 33 years. It's just unbelievable when you think about all the progress we've made prior to this. In 2024, our preliminaries show about a 10% decrease. And after 4 years of increasing, that decrease feels like I can take a breath. It's good. Although I know and met with the families that have lost loved ones this year, lost children and mothers and fathers and friends. And, we just have so much work ahead of us because that shouldn't be happening to anybody.
And to put this in context, the 10% decline still has us way above our low water mark prior.
Yeah, so in 2019, it was 574, which wasn't a great number, of course, but we'd love to get back to that and then start really making progress. We still aren't where we should be.
Remind us of the factors that experts believe led to the spike, and then what are some factors that might be attributable to the beginnings of a decline?
Yeah, well, the expert researchers are going to come up with an answer that's probably better than mine about why we increased. But certainly COVID cleared out the roads. People started speeding because they had clearer roads than they'd had before. And once people started using the roads more and our volumes went back up, people just continued that speeding behavior. And we know that speeding is a problem because of physics. The faster you go, the harder you crash, the more likely that crash goes from a serious injury or a no-injury crash to a fatal crash because of speed. So we know that speed has played a role in that increase.
Was there also an increase in impaired driving that, again, correlated with a very stressful time in this country and in this world?
So we saw pretty much all of the factors increase over COVID. Impaired driving really increased. And I think in society, we also saw drug use and alcohol use become more common, perhaps more frequent. And, that plays out on our roads, unfortunately.
I mean, I'd be interested also if there was, to some extent, and this seems sort of counterintuitive, but during a global pandemic, if in fact maybe some people at least were taking more risks. Or maybe because, we were so contained otherwise, people were letting it out in other ways.
It'd be an interesting question to ask. I think that people during COVID felt more isolated. And I think when we break that social fabric a little bit, there's maybe a less care in our consciousness.
So what about theories on why we might be starting to see declines?
Yeah, again, I'm not the expert on the data research, but in my opinion, we have been talking about it more. And I will tell you that culture changes through conversations. So as you mentioned, you had me on the program before. We've been hitting the news media a lot. We've been hitting paid media a lot. We have a network of Target Zero managers that represent every county in the state, and we've sent them out to do a lot more public engagement and public listening. And law enforcement has really picked up in just within our grants, which is a small fraction of law enforcement. We just give them some money to do extra stuff. 130 agencies are participating. They're spending more money. They're doing more hours than they had before. They're making more speeding tickets and giving out more distracted driving tickets and arresting more DUIs. And that's, I think, an important piece of this, too.
This is not just a Washington State problem. I imagine you are talking to colleagues in other states. People are putting their heads together. What do you hear when you have those conversations or go to conferences?
Yeah, so it's a lot of the same story. Speeds increasing. We're lucky to be living in Washington, to be honest, because we have some states who have increased speeds to 80 miles an hour. And now they're retrofitting
Legally.
their freeways. Yeah, legal
Yeah.
speeds, legal freeway speeds of 80 miles an hour. And instead of making roads safer, they're now having to go back and make on-ramps longer so that you can get up to 80 miles an hour before you merge onto the freeway, and building out different barriers so that if you hit them at 80,
Something that might have
Yeah.
accordion or been able to withstand an impact of a car going
60.
60 or 70 now has to be able to withstand that for
Yeah.
a vehicle going 80
So
plus.
we're lucky to live in Washington where we're not increasing speeds, and we have a engineering field here that really believes in traffic safety. Roundabouts that you're seeing going in everywhere are a good way to slow vehicles down and make intersections safer. They're really designing to lower speeds so that you feel like you're going the right speed, rather than having a big open road that makes you feel like you're safer going faster.
Well, let's come back to this sort of bigger issue of highway fatalities, how you reduce them. You mentioned Target Zero. This state has a goal of getting to zero, but obviously the trends have been going in the wrong direction. But let's pivot to talking about the summer months in particular, which is one of the reasons we wanted to have you on now. Is we're just starting the summer, and we often hear the 100 days or 90 days of summer are among, if not the deadliest months. It does seem maybe not counterintuitive because more people are on the roads,
Yeah.
but it seems particularly unfortunate when people are trying to get out and have fun.
Right.
And then you have to, kids are graduating from high school, people are setting out on vacation, you want to do weekends out of town camping or whatever.
Yeah.
And oh gosh, you're putting yourself potentially at heightened risk just statistically.
Right. More people are riding motorcycles during the summer months.
It's really
more
noticeable.
People are walking and
Soon as-
biking during summer
Right.
months.
As soon as the weather gets
Yeah.
better, the number of pedestrians, bikes, and motorcycles, the motorcycles in particular, I've noticed it's almost like a switch gets flipped.
Right.
Or they're all communicating. It's like, this is
Yeah.
we talk about the
This is
beginning of
it
boating
here.
season,
Exactly.
first weekend in May. It's like, there's also a beginning of motorcycle season.
Exactly. And 50% of our motorcycle fatalities take place during these summer months.
50%.
50%
Yeah.
during 3 months of
Well,
the year.
again, they're cramming a year's worth of riding into
Yeah.
about 3 months in these parts, at least in the west
And
side.
you mentioned celebrations, 4th of July, and, barbecues and getting together, traveling more miles, also can have an impact on the number of trips that are being taken after drinking. And, that's a combined. There's also this psychological thing that happens when it's the winter and it's hard to see and it's rainy, it might be icy. We do tend to keep our speeds down. We tend to be more alert. We feel like it's not safe, and we drive better. And then all of that clears up, and you're right, motorcycles are out, and the roads feel safer because you can see the distance you need to see, and it's dry.
Yeah.
But
People
it's
roll down the windows, turn up the music,
Right.
and think, oh, everything's
It's false.
fine. Yeah.
False sense of security there.
So, I have noticed, and this is anecdotal because I haven't run the numbers, but I get the State Patrol collision memos, which they send out for more serious incidents. And it does feel like in the last couple of weeks, we've had a pretty dry start to the summer season. that, by Monday, my inbox has 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 of these collision memos.
Yeah.
And these are not fender benders if the State Patrol is sending this out.
Yep. Yeah, I think you're seeing exactly that summer effect.
So what can be done to address this particular, as you say, summer effect?
Yeah.
Or plague, which is we go out to have fun and then bad things are happening.
Again, I think conversations change culture, so bringing awareness to the fact that summer can be more dangerous. We should be more cautious instead of less cautious during these beautiful Northwest summer days. We are running a campaign. We're calling it the 100 Safest Days of Summer. We're launching our first speed campaign, speed-focused campaign in about a decade, which we've been working on for a few years because it's very hard to craft the right speed message. Because when I tell you don't speed, you say everybody speeds.
Right.
So we really are working a ton of focus groups and everything. We've got the message that we think just right to encourage everybody to slow down a little, and most importantly, talk to others about slowing down a little.
Let's watch one of the PSAs that's hitting the airwaves this summer,
thanks.
and then we'll talk about it on the backside.
So why don't you speed?
I've had one too many close calls on the road, and then I learned the facts.
It's dangerous to drive too fast.
It's true. 1 in 3 fatal crashes involve speeding.
This is our neighborhood, too. Most people try to be safe, but speeding is dangerous.
The faster you go, the longer it takes to stop.
The faster you drive, the harder you'd hit someone. That driver gets it. Slower speeds save lives.
Please drive the speed limit so everyone is safe.
Together, we get there.
So tell us why you decided this approach, the animation, this particular messaging. What did you learn in talking to focus groups?
Yeah, exactly. They want the facts. I think a lot of people don't see speed as dangerous. They see it as common. And we wanted to bring it to awareness. We wanted to give people the facts. We didn't want to be out on the roads filming speeding cars. That doesn't help.
You weren't trying to create YouTube videos
Right.
like we see an endless scroll with dash cams or whatever.
But we really feel like it is the neighborhood level piece where people can come together and say, we don't want speeding here. And just that message, slower is safer. We really haven't talked about it much, and we're trying to ease people into examining, paying attention. Somebody will tell me I don't speed, but they do. When they look down, they're like, oh, yeah, it's 35 here and I'm driving 40. I could slow down.
So what other components of this summer campaign can we expect to see? How else will you be driving this message out?
Yeah, so there are a multitude of things. I'll tell you about a few. One is an app, Safer Road Challenge. And you can sign in. It'll grade your drives as you go. So it'll give you some idea, like if you don't think you're speeding and then you put the app on and you follow it, you're like, oh, it marked me down at this stretch of road, and maybe that's a place I'm not paying attention. You can win prizes, and it's a nationwide app, but we've got it for Washington for free, and we're hoping groups can set up challenges and challenge each other. You can challenge your.
Do people have to be worried that their insurance companies are going to find out
this
what this data is showing?
This is de-identified data. It doesn't go to insurance companies. Yeah.
So you can download the app and test yourself.
Yep.
See how you're doing.
Yeah, that's one thing. Working with the State Patrol, we've been working with them on a project. We got a grant from the Governor's Highway Safety Association to help us buy more telematics data. We've been able to build these telematic maps for every State Patrol district. And they have been using those maps to plot out where the most effective use of their patrols are going to be, because they can see through the telematics data the day, the time, the place where we have dangerous driving behaviors happening. And they can focus then on those areas. After it's over, we'll do another set of maps, and we'll be able to see, did we have impacts? Did the pattern just change and now it's happening somewhere else, or did we slow it down here and slow it down everywhere else as well?
So that's interesting. Tell us a little bit about what this telematics data is, how it's being collected, how are you getting it?
Yeah. So we get it, it's all de-identified. We just see hundreds of thousands of trips worth of data plotted out on maps. And they look at hard braking, they look at distracted driving, they look at speeding.
And this is the kind of thing your phone actually knows, because if
your
you have
phone
your phone
or your car.
Or your car.
Yeah,
So they can get it off the cars too.
They can get it off of cars and phones. And we can see really the honest state of things. So for example, when we did our observation surveys for distracted driving, we were able to witness about 10% of drivers being distracted at a certain point, right? When we look at this telematics data, which is much more than one point in time, we realize it's now about 30% of drivers that are picking up their phone and interacting with it in some manner during the course of their trip.
So the State Patrol and your agency have announced a upcoming focus on I-5, I think through Pierce County, maybe up into King County. But again, it's based on this telematics data. So I know you don't speak for the patrol, but as you understand it, how will this work, and how might it look different than historic speed enforcement efforts that we see, maybe around a holiday weekend or whatever?
Yeah, thanks. The State Patrol is actually bringing in a large number, 21 troopers, dedicated to using this data and doing enforcement based on it. That's dedicated on top of what they have been doing. So you should definitely see more patrols. You should see multiple officers out at a time. And they're very serious about changing this bad trend, continuing our downward trend, and I think it'll be amazing. I'm so excited to see what happens.
And the idea again here is to be very data-driven. Go where the data show that speeding, distracted driving, whatever it is happening a lot. And you were saying even they can narrow this down to the hours of the day. I mean, it'd be pretty silly to be sitting on I-5 southbound in Pierce County in the afternoons when it's a standstill.
Right.
But it might be that during the morning hours or midday, that's a speed zone.
That's where we're seeing it.
And so you wouldn't go out there at rush hour, you'd go out there at the times when.
Yeah, and we can see really dangerous speeders, so we might know that at night in this location, there's a handful of people who like to race.
Right. What else about this sort of, and it's interesting because the surviving summer sounds much more promising than what we usually hear, which is these are the deadliest days and months of the year. What else is encompassed in that campaign and that messaging, which is more positive?
Yeah.
And maybe empowering.
Yes,
Let's get through this.
There are plenty of, you have lots of memories of seeing big car crashes and understanding that driving is dangerous. We worry sometimes that for a segment of the population, that just means it's okay that I'm doing what I'm doing. And it's not. And we reinforce that behavior when somebody says everybody speeds, it reinforces speeding behavior. What we need to recognize is that most of us do the right thing. Most of us don't drive impaired. Most of us don't have reckless speeding behaviors. Most of us keep our phones away, 60% basically. And we need to message that to people. And knowing that we have this majority of good drivers, we need to engage those drivers who care to reach out to others, just as a matter of doing business, right? Workplaces can say, you have to go from here to here, but do it safely. Don't talk to us on the phone while you're doing it. Don't work while you drive. Go the speed limit. Families can have rules. And these are the things that we want to encourage, is all of these conversations happening so that people can think about it and change.
Going back to some of the statistics, the State Patrol reports that 31%, about a third of the summer crash deaths involved impairment, and you noted that there are sometimes more opportunities to become impaired as people celebrate the summer, and 25%, this number surprises me to some extent, a quarter involved passengers who were not seatbelted. So what do we know about seatbelt usage trends?
Seatbelt usage trends in Washington, we have had the strongest seatbelt use rate of many of our other states. We learned to wear seatbelts really well, and that's been a long time trend. But we know that some people don't wear their seatbelts, and when speed's a factor, those people who are not buckled up are at even greater risk. So maybe when they weren't buckled up and the crash happened at 45, they survived it. But maybe if the crash happens at 80 and they're not buckled up, they're thrown from the car, and they stay in the car and they're a bullet. It just is so much more deadly. We had some good news in 2024 data, preliminary data, where we saw seatbelt unbuckled people actually decrease. Let me see if I can grab the number for you. 18%. So in 2023, there were 172 unbuckled fatals, and in 2024, there was 141. Way too many. But I hope we're getting back to that good, safe behavior, especially among our young drivers, that we buckle up every trip.
Well, and I know that oftentimes what we hear again from the experts is many of those crashes would have been survivable if the person had been belted in. They might have been injured, but they potentially could have survived.
You get a good bruise when you're wearing your seatbelt and you're in a crash, but you live through it.
In terms of summer crash deaths, the highest occurrence is on weekdays, especially Thursdays, Fridays, and then Sundays, which are, of course, a weekend day, and then between noon and 7. Again, that might not be what we would expect. We might think it to be weekends. We might think it would be nights. But weekdays, middle of the day can be dangerous, too.
Yeah.
Is there a most urgent message you would have for drivers heading into these summer weeks and summer months?
Absolutely. About 75% of fatalities have one of four factors. The driver was impaired, the driver was driving too fast, people in the car weren't buckled up, and distraction. 4 behaviors that are pretty easy to avoid. And we could reduce our summer fatalities immensely. We could have the safest summer ever. It just is within our grasp.
I should note that the State Patrol emphasis patrols are going to be happening June 16th through July 31st. So it's not just a weekend.
It's not just a weekend.
This is a big chunk of the summer.
An entire month.
And again, and to be clear, are they sticking with these 4 emphasis corridors along I-5, or are they going to be moving around?
Every district has access to those
So
maps.
the one I saw was for a particular district.
Right. What you saw was District 1.
But will they... So even within those districts, though, will it change up? Or are they saying, we've got our 4 highest areas, that's what we're going to come back to day after day after day? Do you know?
Don't know.
Okay. That's a question for the State Patrol. And this also, I should say, coincides with the deployment of Target Zero troopers in 8 of the districts. These were the people you were talking about. There's the everyday troopers, and then there's troopers that are sort of assigned specifically to this work. Do you know if they're going to be using marked cars, unmarked cars, a combination of the two?
I don't know. I've heard news reports like you have that they're using more unmarked vehicles, which is brilliant.
Okay. Not everybody likes that, but...
All you have to do is go the speed limit. You don't have anything
fine,
to worry about.
What is the sense you have of, I'm interested in this telematics technology being used to identify the behavior. What about our vehicles technology helping us not be our own worst enemy?
Good question. The legislature this year passed a bill that allowed judges to order speed limiter technologies into the vehicles of drivers who are reckless or who are dangerous speeding drivers. And we're the second state in the nation to do that. And it is saying basically, if you are repetitively driving recklessly and speeding above the speed limit and you accumulate tickets, judges can order a device to be put in your car that actually knows where you are, knows what the speed limit is, and just prevents you from going over it.
And it literally prevents you. It doesn't just tell you you're speeding. It doesn't let the car speed.
It doesn't let the car speed.
And this is analogous to the breathalyzer devices that are required for people who've been arrested for drunk driving.
Very similar.
Or convicted of drunk driving.
And both of those technologies are technologies that could be put into vehicles as NHTSA, as the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, looks at how they're going to rule for future car making. The other technology that is really exciting to me is, like you mentioned, breath devices in vehicles as a penalty. This is the build of a car that just won't let you drive if you're above a set limit, say 0.05 or 0.08. It just won't start because, you know, with everything we know about impaired driving, we know how dangerous it is. Why do people do it? Well, because they're impaired, their judgment's low, and they can. Nothing prevents it.
So my understanding is that so Washington State has passed this law, and by the way, the implementation timeline was pushed out quite a ways. I think it's 2029.
We want to make sure we have everything in place so that people aren't in a position where they've been asked to put this technology in, and we don't have the systems to support that.
So there's a kind of a long on-ramp to this. I think Virginia also passed this. New York, maybe?
The city of New York has used speed limiter technology in all their fleet vehicles.
But it's definitely an idea that's catching
Yes,
on around the
it was
country,
in a lot
and
of
there's
different
a
legislators
fairly
looking at it.
organized constituency for this. On the, my recollection is that the bipartisan infrastructure law had some language about, if not requiring, at least sort of looking at this anti-impairment technology for future car.
Yes.
You know, when we build future manufactured cars in the future.
If we just manufactured cars that were built into this, it's.
So what is the status of that federal
we have
rulemaking? I mean, do you know if it's actually going to be required?
It was supposed to have been done in 2024, and they asked for an
extension.
So we'll see.
So nothing imminent, but down the road, when you might someday buy a new car, and it would have technology, and you don't actually have to breathe into a tube. It can pick it up through your fingerprints. I think it can pick up just from the breathing in the.
Yeah. So your finger vein can actually tell what your alcohol level is, and then just normal breaths in the car, maybe a puff directed towards something, can also tell. It's much more accurate technology than we've ever had before, and it can be done without interference. And we're going to have these vehicles available to us in this state. So we partnered with DOT, and they're having a small fleet of vehicles equipped with this technology. Not because we think they're driving drunk, let me be clear, but because we want to make sure that this technology is flawless. And so we're just doing a test here.
So will you be getting one of them?
I don't get one.
You don't get one.
We don't have a fleet vehicle.
But they will,
would.
for agencies that do have fleet vehicles, they'll kind of spread these out, and then
just the state patrol, or I'm sorry, just Department of Transportation has the vehicles now. But we will have another car that's a community outreach car. That'll be marked. It'll be at Hoop Fest. It's going to be at our conference. People can get into it, see how it works.
Do you know when the fleet arrives and when this will be in use?
Well, when is Hoop Fest? Beginning of July?
Okay. Yeah, in Spokane.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know I believe the Secretary of Transportation in Connecticut was driving one of these vehicles for a while. Okay, let's take a quick break. When we return, we'll continue our conversation with Shelly Baldwin of the Traffic Safety Commission, back right after this.
We must make it easier, faster, and less expensive to build housing of all kinds.
It's worse than what they think. They might be underestimating how quick and how easy it's going to be to make some of the changes that are needed.
I'm signing executive order immediately following this speech, directing state agencies to review all regulations that impact housing, permitting, and construction.
They're saying all the right things, and I really appreciate that. I just don't think they understand how bad the problem is.
Welcome back to Inside Olympia. Joining me once again is Shelly Baldwin, Acting Director of the Washington State Traffic Safety Commission. We've talked about motorcycles being out on the roads, higher fatalities. We do have some statistics about those motorcycle riders, if I can find them. But they're obviously quite vulnerable, as are teen. I actually don't have statistics for motorcyclists. I do have them for young drivers. Fatalities rose, and I believe this was over the same period we've been talking about, kind of the COVID era. 50% among drivers 16 and 17 and 21 to 25. That's such a vulnerable population. They're the newer, less experienced drivers. To what do you attribute that?
Well, like you said, they're the youngest drivers. Their experience matters. Driving is a very complex task. You're paying attention to and making decisions like that the whole time we're driving. And experience really matters. I was really pleased this year when we passed a reform to our driver's education rules. So starting in
I'm listening because I have a driver in training in the household, so I'm paying attention.
Good for you. You know, right now, if you're 16 and 17, you have to take driver's ed before you can get your driver's license. And what we saw was a lot of people waiting until they're 18 to do that. And so when we looked at those who had gotten licensed at 16 and 17 and compared them to people who waited, we could see a real protective factor for 16 and 17-year-olds who got their license after getting driver's ed, and, you know, other regulations that go on to that with driving 50 hours of
certain
practice.
Number of hours,
and restrictions on nighttime, daytime, number of passengers. But what we saw was there were a lot of people who were skipping driver's ed, not because they wanted to skip driver's ed, but because they couldn't afford it, or they couldn't get to one. There wasn't an easy place to go. They have to drive 3 hours to do their driving. You know, it was a big problem. And this bill does some really exciting things. So it's going to extend the need for driver's education before licensing up to age 21. It'll do it a year at a time, starting in 2027. So then you'll have to be 18. If you're 18 and younger, you'll have to get driver's ed, and then increase a year after that, so that by the time anybody who was born in 2009 will be subject to this new, or later, will be subject to this extended period of needing to get driver's education before you get your license. It benefits everyone. Like, we're all out on the roads, and we'll have more trained drivers out on the roads with us. It also did a really great thing, because I mentioned before, some people just can't afford it.
It's not cheap.
It's not cheap. And so
it used to be, you know, at least when I was growing up, you did it through school.
You never even thought about the cost of it.
Right. And I mean, I can't remember much of those details then, but nowadays it's mostly happening, or maybe exclusively happening,
There's
private
very
schools.
few schools that still have it right now. Part of the package is looking at how do we get more driving instructors trained and out on the roads to teach more people in especially rural
areas,
and underserved areas, right? That's where we want to make sure, and the bill provides for that. The bill also provides for scholarships for low-income families. And I think...
So is that state funding?
Yeah, it is fees and fines.
Fees and fines that will help subsidize that for people, and it's based on income eligibility?
Yeah.
Any other key element to that driver's ed reforms that you would highlight before we move on?
You know, driver's ed has been the same as it was back in the 50s when we started doing it, right? Driver's test is turn left, turn right, back around a corner, parallel park.
Yep.
I mean,
Basics.
It's nothing. It doesn't, what we need is driver's education, and what DOT is bringing to us is driver's education that focuses on hazard awareness, that focuses on emotional states, right? Like, maybe you had to learn this the hard way. I know I did. When you're upset, driving is a bad idea.
So does that mean, is the curriculum, the mandated curriculum, going to change?
The curriculum is going to change, yeah.
One thing that did not pass this year that's been in discussion for a few years now is lowering our drunk driving limit from 0.08 to 0.05. This is something Utah's done. It's the standard in most countries around, or many countries around the world. It's an idea that's been introduced in a lot of states but hasn't yet passed here. There are opponents, criticism, pushback, but I know it's something that your agency feels pretty strongly about. So what's the status of this?
I'm very, very disappointed that we didn't pass it. We know that it will have at least an 11% effect on our fatals. You know, it doesn't cost anything. What we see when we pass it is fewer impaired drivers on the road because people are making different choices. What we see is fewer crashes, fewer fatalities, and it doesn't harm, all of the studies say it doesn't harm industry, it doesn't harm our alcohol and beer And wine,
That's a,
it's a big...
that industry
it's
has
a big,
been concerned about that.
It's a big part of Washington culture, and we don't want to harm it. But all of the studies show that people continue to drink. They just make other plans and do it differently.
Utah has been the early lead on this and sort of the bellwether. I know I had a conversation at some point in the last year with a skeptic of this policy who said, initially Utah's, the initial data seemed to suggest that this was having a positive impact, and it wasn't, resulting actually in a dragnet of a bunch more people being arrested for DUI. It was actually seemed to be changing behaviors, and people, as you noted, were
fewer
making
impaired
different
drivers,
decisions.
fewer DUI arrests.
But the conversation, I can't remember who it was with, the person I was speaking with said, it's a few years out, it's less clear, and that they seemed not convinced that this actually has durable effect. So what are you hearing? What have you seen? Have you had a chance to talk with folks recently in Utah?
Yeah. So in Utah, their law went into effect in 2019. They saw a large drop. Then, like every other state, when COVID hit, they saw increases. Their increases were from a lower place than they would have been, and like I said, what causes traffic fatals is a very complicated picture. But they saw those big decreases, and now they're seeing decreases that are bigger than what other states are seeing as we flip on the other side of this. And you can look at that one and say, I don't know, COVID interfered with our study of it, but 80% of the world lives under lower than 0.08 limits. There's a good percentage that it's illegal to drink and drive. There's a percentage where you can have a 0.01 or a 0.02. There's a large percentage that's, 0.05 and under, and they haven't seen impacts to their industry. They saw those initial drops, and it's proven. There are so many research studies that show how effective this is, what it does do and what it doesn't do. Utah is just not, the example that they're saying it doesn't work isn't backed by any research. Utah still says it worked.
The chief proponent of this is Senator John Lovick, who's a retired state trooper. He's been running the bill for a couple of years. I know it got out of a couple of committees this year, did not get a vote. It's earned some bipartisan support, but there is, going back to the opposition, hospitality and wine industries, groups that have warned the measure would increase liability, hurt business, penalize moderate drinkers, and that it would be difficult to enforce such a low BAC.
So when you're at a 0.05, you've already doubled your risk of a crash. By the time you get to, or increased it, I really hate it when I get that wrong, I'm sorry.
You were at a higher risk, though.
You're at a higher risk at 0.05.
Yeah, I've
at
seen that data too.
At 0.07, it's doubled. By the time you're at 0.08, it's really bad. Most of us don't get to a 0.05. If we're casually drinking over the course of a evening, 4 or 5 hours, and we have a couple, we're just not going to get to a 0.05. So we're not penalizing anybody who's a light drinker. We're not going after that. And we're not trying to penalize anybody, right? We're trying to change the culture around how we drink and drive, how we drink and how we get around afterwards. What were the other things that you said?
So increasing liability, hurting businesses,
liability.
penalizing moderate drinkers.
Yeah, so liability, the bill actually has a statement in it that says servers are not liable to a BAC level. We have court cases that show that. The bill actually says it's not going to change any server liability. Nobody knows. I don't look at you and say, oh, you're a 0.25. Nobody has that ability. And servers have been trained in this state, and that server training will still be effective to recognize signs of impairment.
Mm-hmm. And over-serving is the...
And they need to stop over-serving. If they see that.
There are also concerns that have been raised about, increased DUI arrests, court congestion, whether there's really a significant safety benefit below 0.08. The Brewers Guild noted that most DUI fatalities involve much higher BACs above 0.15.
Yeah. Good. This is all what's being said. So the reality of what we saw is that people change their behavior. Once people change their behavior, this is the most preventative bill we could pass. Once people change their behavior, you don't have more impaired drivers on the road. You're not going to clog the courts. Law enforcement officers aren't going to change how they're enforcing the law. We arrest people now at .05 because they're visibly calling the officer's attention. It's preventative, and all of the stuff that's on the back end is noise.
What do you think happens going forward with this bill?
I think we're going to pass it.
Do you think that's 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 years?
Oh, I wish I knew. It took us a long time to upgrade our distracted driving bill. That was 4 or 5 years of talking about it before we got it done. Everybody I knew said we'd never get that done, even policy staff. Everyone's like, "You're crazy. No one's gonna vote for this." It took a while. Sadly, every year that we didn't do it, another family was motivated to come to Olympia and lobby for its passage. How many people did we lose during that time? I feel the same way about this bill. It'll pass. It's the right thing to do.
Because you've talked to me before, that one of my particular interests is the scourge of wrong-way driving. And in my day job with Pluribus News, I report a lot on transportation policies around the country. And there's a lot of states that have been very innovative and very proactive about installing upgraded technologies to mitigate for that. Connecticut's a good example, Nevada, other states. I thought that there was some language to create a study or pilot on this.
There is a pilot going on with Department of Transportation. They set up various sites to try out different types of technology. It's still ongoing. We should have the report next year, I think.
So what do you think that will lead to? And where I come back to is I think of Washington as a leader on so many issues, and on this one, it just feels like we have fallen way behind a lot of other states that have just gotten out there. Connecticut, again, they get money in the budget every year, and they go out and they identify the high-risk on-ramps and off-ramps, and they put in this technology, and it seems like they've got it down to kind of a science here. Bells, whistles, alerts, boom, boom, boom. Okay, that one's done. Check it off. Move to the next one.
Yeah.
And in this state, it's not infrequent that we see these horrible headlines.
And when
these
you
kinds
have
of
a
crashes.
wrong-way driver, they're almost always impaired, and it's almost always a very deadly crash. It's horrible.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
So what's your sense of where we might be headed with this, especially if we do have a pilot study underway?
I think the pilot study will identify what's effective, where we should invest. Like you said, Connecticut invested big everywhere. We are in a budget crisis, and it's hard to get money for things right now.
Speaking of which, how did you're a small agency, but this bigger issue of traffic safety, which spans a bunch of different agencies, has very much been in the news, on the minds of legislators. How did you and how did your agency and these programs fare in the latest budget?
Yeah. Like you said, traffic safety is a pretty bipartisan issue. Everybody wants us to make our home, regardless of the route we take, or the way we do it. And my very small agency doesn't have a very large state budget to begin with. 80% of our funding is federal, so our state budget remained where it was. We gave up a little bit of money that we felt we could do without harming programming. And we got, we have $2 million a biennium as a DUI-focused project where we're able to actually hire law enforcement officers to be full-time DUI officers in those counties or cities where we know they need that extra help. We've been able to increase HVE patrols beyond what our federal dollars were paying for. And we've been able to work with tribes. That money is so much easier to work with tribes and let the tribes co-create with us what's going to work for them. It's been a great, great pot of money. We received money for telematics data, so we're also able to kind of explore that. And those pieces stayed with us.
We are, though, in this era of great uncertainty about federal funding.
We are.
And, the bipartisan infrastructure law passed under the Biden administration, sent a lot of money to states for infrastructure upgrades. There was this big focus on safe streets and protecting vulnerable road users and money being parceled out. But the new administration has come in, obviously, and is scrutinizing a lot of this stuff, and in some cases, turning off the spigot or cutting, there's attempts to cut the budget. And because so much of this work is grant-based and federal grant-based, how are you planning for the future, or what are you preparing for? Do you see concerns about funding being interrupted?
Yeah, so we're 80% federal funding, so it's a big concern as we watch all the changes that are happening. Even just the number of federal employees that are leaving. Our states depend on a regional National Highway Traffic Safety Administration office to provide them what they need to review, to give them money, to review their invoices. And our office, Region 10, was cut in half. So not only am I worried about whether or not I'm going to get it, I'm worried about whether or not I'll have the support to pay our bills. Wow. They've been doing a great job with a lot less people. They've been prioritizing. I admire them, but it is tough.
So far, though, no bounce checks.
So far, we got all of our money for 2025. October 1 starts 2026. It's still a little iffy, but I will say that in general, if you look at who knows what the final package is coming out of Congress, but it didn't include cuts to transportation.
It strikes me that in this space, that change often happens quite slowly. I know the NTSB will make safety recommendations that are not binding, and they will go to states. They might be a recommendation to NHTSA. I think that can happen. And you can look at these recommendations and you can see who's acted on them and who hasn't acted on them. Or you can see the recommendation made and years pass and nothing changes. Mm-hmm. Just because you've been in this business for a while, what's your observation, or maybe more importantly, your diagnosis of why, when we're talking about saving lives in the transportation sphere and space, which is, we're all using it, we're all potentially impacted. Absolutely. We have very low tolerance for aviation crashes. Why does why does change happen so glacially?
Yeah. So some of that is how we design roads, right? So some of that glacial change is understanding what mistakes we've made in the past, and then how do we correct those? And how much money is it going to cost us to really get roads that are
more forgiving,
self-enforcing, or more forgiving? They don't let you speed as much. They have roundabouts so you're not doing T-bone crashes. That world exists, and it's already in place in other countries. That takes a long time, A. B, a lot of the safety things, I just need four things, and we'd solve so much of our problem, are inconvenient for people. It's more convenient to pick up your phone and call someone while you're driving, because you're doing two things at once and you feel very masterful.
Right, efficient.
It's inconvenient to plan ahead when you're going to go out drinking. It's the society that we live in that we passed a marijuana law, right? And marijuana is different than alcohol. When it's combined, it's even more deadly. There's a lot of forces at work, which is why I say there's never one magic key. But largely there's, 0.05. We know it would save lives. We're having trouble getting it passed because of people who worry that it would have other impacts, or who argue that it wouldn't have impacts that we are saying it would. Nothing seems to be clean and easy. The technology that we could build into cars that would turn off your phone, that would not start if you were impaired, that would keep you from speeding, we could mandate that. We could have federal laws. Like, why don't we have a federal seatbelt law? We know how important it is.
I asked you about, automobile technologies. We now have autonomous trucks running in Texas. I think they now have drivers back in them for safety, but the technology is there where they can actually put an 18-wheeler on the road and send it down the highway without a driver. to what extent do you see a future where autonomous vehicle, and for that matter, Waymos and other autonomous vehicles are driving around major metropolitan areas these days, delivering people to where they want to go?
Yeah.
How much do you see that future being part of the traffic safety solution?
I imagine a future where that's going to be a big equalizer. People who can't drive right now would be able to get around. That's a precious thing. It depends on how we implement it, of course. And I think probably 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we all thought that, it would be here now.
It was imminent, yeah.
Right. Like all of these vehicles would be driving themselves. We wouldn't need to drive at all anymore. And we know how long fleet change takes. So there's currently not a vehicle that you can buy that is fully automated. They're being used in fleets, like you said, trucks, they're taxis, there's, these systems of it, but I can't go buy an automated vehicle right now.
Are you in the camp, though, that thinks that autonomous vehicles are our ticket to target zero? Or are you in the camp that thinks there's a false promise here and I'm not going to go invest in those companies because I don't think it's going to be our future?
Well, I'm not investing in any companies.
That's, probably good.
And I'm tending to withhold judgment. I think that there's promise. I'm hopeful that as a society, we'll make that promise work for the society as a whole. And it's not here. Not the way that it would matter, right? If we had 80% of our fleet, and I don't mean our fleet, I mean all of the cars on the road were automated, we'd still have some that weren't. If it's left to individuals to buy, who's going to be liable for that? There's just a lot of details that have to be worked out before that becomes our one solution. And I will tell you, I've been in this field a long time, and there's never one solution.
Let me bring this back to the human behind the wheel, and we've talked about the speeders, and you've delivered the message. What about the person who is trying to do the right thing and gets out on the highway and is getting passed left and right and feels like, if I go the speed limit, I'm going to be smushed out here. And so if they're all going 70 or 75, I think I'll just keep up with the gang.
Yeah, it's very common. In fact, people feel that's the safest. I feel safest when I'm driving with this big group of people that are all driving the same speed as me.
Because that's reality out there now.
It is how it feels. We've let it be how it feels. We've made that excuse, I'm just keeping up with traffic. I actually drive the speed limit. I have a car that I can set and forget, like I'm just going 60. Mm-hmm. And people pass me, but I never feel like I'm in danger because people are passing me. I make sure I'm giving plenty of room so people can pass me. I'm
not camping out in the fast lane.
I'm not camping out in the fast lane trying to make everybody else go 60. Right. And it's safer. I have more time to react if something happens. And what this really beautiful thing happens is that you're driving, you're surrounded by all these other vehicles that are going faster than you. And if you keep going 60, pretty soon you have the road to yourself because we drive in bubbles.
Right.
Because everyone's going with everyone else. And so the safest place you can be on the freeway is clear of other vehicles.
Not in a bubble, yes.
And then you'll have another bubble come and pass you by, and then you have the free. Mm-hmm. Try it. It's really fun.
Okay. Any other tips for people who are just trying to survive out there?
Yeah. Practical tips. Set your cell phones, get your directions before you leave, then leave your cell phones alone. Pass it off to someone else. And really, truly, the way that we're going to change this is talking to other people. Set a family rule. Make sure you're having these conversations.
And we didn't mention pedestrians, or we haven't talked about them, but just a brief mention about their vulnerability. And we've seen a spike in record pedestrian deaths.
Last year was a record pedestrian death after the year before being a record pedestrian death. 2024 is a little bit low, but certainly not acceptable. They remain very vulnerable. There's a lot of reasons for that. And mostly we need drivers who bear the brunt of that responsibility to slow down and pay attention when they're around pedestrians.
Okay. A final word as we head into the summer months.
Drive sober. Tell other people to drive sober. Help prevent other people from driving drunk. Don't use your phone. Buckle up. It's easy.
Okay, Shelly Baldwin from the Washington State Traffic Safety Commission. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you so
Appreciate it very much. Have a good, safe summer.
Yeah.
And thank you for watching Inside Olympia. We will see you again next week.